Chapter 170 to 172. Yes. Why not? There is no problem telling you where I have hidden the Dragon Balls. It's what I had promised. Broly said, trying to hide his smile, a smile as or more evil than the one Frieza was using to speak to him. Oh yeah. You're being very understanding, and apathetic. I thought you would explode in fury and make things difficult for me. The person responsible for the death of your friends. You know, the feelings and stuff. Ho ho ho. Please keep going. I want to make my wish and leave this seedy planet, Frieza said, who was trying to enjoy that moment as much as he could, despite not knowing that his two loyal toadies had died, which bothered him for a second. Okay. Wipe the wax off your strange ears and listen well. Because I'm going to reveal its location, Broly said, changing the tone of his voice as if he were the presenter of a quiz show. And following that advice, Frieza eagerly awaited these answer. Bam. 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 An answer that did not come, since Broly was deliberately delaying the situation to create expectation, perhaps in excess. And that was obviously exasperating Frieza, who started hitting the ground with his tail on the ground. And the answer is that the Dragon Balls are in a parallel dimension of mine. Broly said before eating popcorn again as if that matter has already been resolved. Bam. 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 Bomb. And when do you plan to give them to me? Frieza yelled after breaking that silence, destroying a row nearby mountains with an energy sphere. The reason for that reaction was more than obvious. He was extremely furious and irritated by that extreme mockery. No one had humiliated him as much as Broly did today. Although Beerus technically did it, but at this time Beerus was not even an idea in Toriyama's head. Frieza wanted his Dragon Ball. And once he had them in his hands and obtained immortality, he would personally take care of skinning that supposed megalomaniac Super Saiyan. Hey! At what point did I say that? I am going to give you the Dragon Balls. What I said was, I'll tell you where they are. I don't understand, why are you complaining? Wah 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 wah. Wah 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 wah. Wah 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 wah. You should see the face you're making. Wah 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 wah. Broly said as he laughed in the most exaggerated way he could while pointing to Frieza, the Emperor of the Universe, as if he were a faint-hearted idiot easy to cheat. Broly at the time felt like Nelson Muntz when he pointed to someone who had been ridiculed for his own stupidity. As if he were Kazutaka Hyoto, Kaiji, seeing the suffering of the poor idiots who lost everything, including their dignity when losing in the rigged clandestine bets that he himself organized with that same objective. This situation is so fucking satisfying. Jich. Jich. Damn. Damn you. Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you think I'm someone you can make fun of without consequences? Frieza shouted with a hateful look as he launched energy attacks against Broly consecutively. Attacks that, like before, passed through him as if he were a ghost. Therefore, Frieza, tired of the superiority complex and teasing the mutant Saiyan enemy, decided to use his Pisquick powers against him. But it was useless, it didn't work either. And after that, he used his extreme speed to attack melee. FIU. FIU. Flap. PLOM. Even so, the result did not change. Frieza was still unable to touch him. What the hell? What happens to this guy? Is he really here? Maybe he is a projection. Frieza thought as he experienced the frustrating feeling of hitting something unreachable, like a cat chasing after a laser pointer. No matter how many times he hit, he was unable to touch him. Frieza was even beginning to wonder if Broly's existence was nothing more than a brilliant ploy made up of many tricks to confuse his perception. But... bam! When that ghost hit him with its tail on the forehead, almost losing consciousness. Boom! Frieza understood that his suspicions were perhaps wrong. Broly maybe was real, and if he really exists he is monstrously strong. Come on, don't cry. How about we make a deal? A second round. The same conditions as before. If you win I will give you the Dragon Balls. If you lose, well, worse for you, Broly proposed to Frieza, who was trying to get up from the ground after that tail blow. Therefore, Frieza decided to be cautious with Broly again despite his constant provocations. For now he would keep playing his game, at least until he got the Dragon Balls. Then he would try to kill him in cold blood in the most painful way he can, even if for this was necessary ask for the help to his father. Sounds good. But you should not only give me the Dragon Balls, you should also let me use them with total freedom, prevent any interruption and explain correctly how to use them. Oh. You have become very farsighted. Learning from your mistakes, right? Not for nothing are you the Emperor of the Universe, although technically you inherited that title. Okay, no problem, Broly said, who was a little disappointed that he couldn't continue to fool this other villain. Not everyone in this universe was as idiotic as they seemed. And Frisia, partly praised for that phrase, but also offended by the part of the inheritance, continued to negotiate the terms of the bet. And how will the fight take place? Will you personally fight against me and my Frisia force? Ha 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 ha. Hiya. No, Broly said as he snapped his fingers once more to announce that he had just done something, although he didn't need to snap his fingers at all, but was cool. And right after the snap, from the crater where Goku was vaporized by Frisia's mortal sphere. Why in such a hurry? You haven't even given me time to eat the dessert. Goku appeared as happy as ever, without any scratch on his body, which radiated with energy and the desire to fight once more, at the same time that he was cleaning the remains of food that he had in his mouth. Oya. This is the first time that I kill someone personally and try to challenge me again. I don't know if I can get used to this. It will be the third time that I kill someone with the same appearance. It could become a habit. Hoo. Frisia said, very shocked to see that Goku had returned to life and seemed not to be discouraged despite having been disintegrated by him a few seconds ago. However, Frisia was the Emperor of the Universe. He had to maintain his usual despotic and confident attitude. He has a reputation to maintain. Well, I declare the start of the second round. Whoever wins wins, Broly said as he continued to eat from his flying chair. In a place not too far away on that planet. What has happened? The last thing I remember is beating Ginger, when suddenly I felt a great pain in my head, Dodoria said, who got up from the ground very disoriented and for some reason that he did not know, with a great headache and neck pain. Dodoria? But, how it's possible? Said Zarbon, who was a few meters from him and who, like his pink co-worker, also did not know what had happened to him after he tried to kill Mutant Rashi and Yam. However, what puzzled him most of all was that his co-worker was alive despite being beheaded almost before his eyes. What the hell was going on? How ridiculous. This scum have also come to life. What a waste of time, said Vegeta, who despite being resurrected at the same time that his ex-co-workers, he was 100% aware of the situation. Vegeta. Damn traitor. So you really have come to this planet to find the Dragon Balls too, shouted Zarbon and Dodoria, interspersing phrases, as if they were a very well-blended couple. Ha. Obviously, however, I have nothing to say to trash like you. I'm going to settle my unfinished business with Frisia, Vegeta said arrogantly, although this time with some strength to support it, as he turned his back on them and flew to where he felt the greatest key of all. As if we were going to allow it. The two mini-bosses shouted when they saw that a player tried to enter the final boss room without first defeating them. And ironically, the same thing happened to them. You can do whatever you want. But before that, the three of us have an unfinished business, said Ginger, who interposed between them in a very badass way. And seeing how little Ginger, who a few seconds ago received a brutal beating from them, stood in their way as if she were John Wayne in a western to start a duel, they could not help but die of laughter. Hua. AIGNNF. This is serious. You? Ha 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 ha. Bomb. But immediately the laughter stopped. What has happened? Zarbon and Dodoria babbled simultaneously from the ground. Both were very confused since a few moments ago they were laughing standing a few meters away of Ginger. But now, as if they had been hit by a gust of wind, both had been pushed several meters from their starting position. And in front of them, everything they could see, the two sisters facing each other bumping their legs, as if they had kicked each other leg at the same time. I see, you still don't let me kill those idiots, Naysan, Ginger said, trying to forcefully push her sister's leg with her leg. You know I would love to do it myself, but I can't. Sorry, Yam replied, trying to keep his sister from continuing her kick using her leg to push hers. And from that perspective, with that conversation and analyzing their situation, Zarbon and Dodoria began to intuit what happened seconds ago. No, it's not possible, it's a joke, right? But it was real. Ginger tried to kill them with two spinning kicks, executing them so quickly that they did not even notice that Ginger had moved from his place. But Yam, due to Gohan's curse, stopped both kicks, saving their lives. Even so, they were not able to avoid the entire blow, since the shock wave caused by the kicks of the two sisters thrown them several meters away, stunning their weak brains, which were unable to remember how they got there. Without even touching them directly, they had already been knocked out. What the hell would happen if they were hit by one of them? That question made them understand what terror was. No, this must be an illusion, it is impossible that they have become so strong in a few seconds. Thanks to Broly's training/torture, in 1 year in the form realm they were able to reach their physical limit, which was around 3 million units of power. Compared to Zarbon and Dodoria, whose combat power was less than 30.000, Ginger and Yam were in a completely different dimension. Now they were strong enough to defend against any threat, except Frisia, so they had little to fear in this planet. I knew you won't make it easy for me, Nei-san. But neither do I, I'm not the same Ginger you knew. I'll kill that scum no matter how much you stop me, Ginger said as she lowered her leg to the ground to begin a new assault on Dodoria and Zarbon. I would rather not stop you. But I'm glad to see you've grown. Well, not in all aspects. Yam said, hinting at a certain complex of her little sister. A complex that the increase in power and 1 more year of age had not been able to eradicate. What have you said? Ginger screamed like mad dog before disappearing from the sight of Zarbon and Dodoria. And with that war cry, hundreds of sound explosions echoed across the small island. Bomb. Pam. Bomb. 1. Pam. Clash. Boom. 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 Gamam. It was as if a thunderstorm had been created with more thunder than lightning, as if hundreds of bombs were detonating one after another, creating terrifying destruction. Until... It seems that I have won for the first time. Hiner said, pleased to see how the torn bodies of Zarbon and Dodoria lay on the ground. They were like withered autumn leaves that had been shattered by collateral damage from the footfalls caused by 2 carnivores fighting. This was not a competition. Besides, we haven't even touched them. Yam said, fascinated. She also couldn't believe that they had become so strong as to kill those 2 guys unconsciously. Guys who had killed them before. And after a few seconds of silence in which they thought about the great change they had experienced in their lives. Nei-san, are you going to go with Vegeta? Ginger asked her sister inquisitively, and with ulterior motives. This. Yes. I guess so. It seems that he has changed a bit, I think we can give him a new chance. And you? You're going to go with those humans, Yam replied, who countered with a similar question. This. Yes. I guess so. Before he came to help us, it would be dishonorable not to return the favor. Also, now I'm much stronger than him. He will also pay me for what he did to me on Earth, Ginger replied as a stereotypical Tsudara. She was very embarrassed for showing her true intentions. And after a few seconds in which both looked uncomfortably, they wished each other luck and parted to head to a different battlefield. Elsewhere on the planet Namek. On that battlefield 5 people were resurrected at the same time, one of those 4 being more disoriented than others, and nearby there were 4 other people, who were moving away from that place. However, at a certain point these 4 detected abnormal data in the trackers they had on their heads. Therefore, they backtracked to see what had happened. And when they got there they saw something incomprehensible. Those whom they had massacred had come to life. And besides that, I cannot believe it. Guldo is alive too. Jis yelled upon see that his green partner had been resurrected. What? I was dead. Gold exclaimed, who didn't realize that he had died. In Dragon Ball sometimes there are people who remember the other world and other times not. I am very happy that you are well, Goldo. Now we can redo our charismatic team battle stances, Captain Jinyu said with joy, who had stated quite clearly that he only cared about the stances, the lives of his subordinates was secondary. Ye cease. All the members shouted in a synchronized way, despite the fact that they had just been told in a more or less subtle way that their only value lies in their ability to pose in a ridiculous way. Let's go, guys. Let's do a super pose of reconciliation. We owe it to ourselves. Jinyu shouted, very excited to be able to perform the stance/presentation that was previously interrupted. Yes. Everyone answered at the same time. Ready, I. Joe. And without a logical explanation, a catchy music started playing. Special Force. Special Force. Special Force. Special Force. Special Force. Recom. Recom yelled, performing an extremely embarrassing pose to introduce himself unnecessarily, one more time. Berta. Berta yelled, performing an extremely embarrassing and unnecessary pose like his partner, one more time. J.E. Flaring Neo Kikaho. Boom. And once again a fairly powerful energy attack interrupted them. Damn. Again. Why the hell have you interrupted us again? Do you not learn the lesson? You should never interrupt the presentation to someone. The members of the Jinyu force shouted when they were interrupted in the same way as a few chapters ago. Sorry. It's see you doing that is very embarrassing. We have let you make a fool of yourself until Mutant Rashi and Krillin arrived, and they are already here. Ten Shinhan said, explaining why he had attacked now and why not before. Oh no. They have killed Guldo again, Rikon yelled when he saw that Gult had been charred to death a second time that day before he could use his incredible special abilities to stop time. You bastards. I hope he will be resurrected again, because if not, we will kill you again in the MO. Ji said, which perfectly matched her captain's moral priorities. He was also the most affected by these surprise attacks, since he was interrupted twice. He was even interrupted right now before he could finish his sentence. By decapitation. Shut your mouth. Listening to you is torture, Piccolo said while holding Ji's decapitated head in his hand. Wait. The whole villain team shouted when they saw what had happened. Had they lost another partner? Yes, but that wasn't the most important thing now. The biggest problem was that nobody had seen how Piccolo approached them and decapitated his vice-captain. Nobody. Among them were Berta, the self-proclaimed fastest being in the universe, and Jinyu, the self-proclaimed second strongest being in the universe. However, none of them were able to notice anything, until it was too late. Therefore, with litters of cold sweat falling from his veiny head, Jinyu used his tracker with great panic to calculate Piccolo's power. Plaff. But the tracker exploded. No, not possible, this tracker can calculate up to 600,000 units. Jinyu shouted as he began to have an existential crisis. And while that was happening, boom. Now it is not so tough. Sorry, I didn't mean to end you so easily or by surprise, but you shouldn't be distracted in the middle of a fight, Nail said after shooting an energy ball at Recom, killing him with one blow. Oh. This is bad. I have to escape from here, and inform Master Frisia. Exactly. I'm not running away, shouted and thought Berta upon see that only he and the captain were still alive. He had to report that those Namekians had come back to life being extremely strong. So at high speed he tried to escape from there. But before you go for a walk, you and I have a grudge that we must solve first, said Nail, who grabbed Berta by the shoulder. What? How did he reach me? Berta thought, terrified and without any confidence for having lost in speed against someone. Ah. And by self-reflection and fear, Berta, understanding that he couldn't escape, tried to face Nail, hitting him with his elbow. Flash. However, he hit the air. What? Where? Nail had disappeared from his sight, since at an imperceptible speed Nail moved behind him. This is for Yeno, Nail said as he hit Berta in the ribs, avenging the death of one of his friends, who were now part of him. Bomb. Ag hey hi kai. Berta agonized upon receiving that explosion in his ribs, which disintegrated, like all his nearby organs. This is for Zarfo, Nail said once again hitting him with the same intensity once more in the ribs, but on the opposite side to the first blow. Bomb. Ag. Agag. And this is for. However, Nail couldn't finish his sentence or give the final blow to the head to kill him. Since Berta was falling from the sky. Those two attacks that Nail had softened a lot had killed him before he could metaphorically avenge Tamika. Plash. Sorry Tamika, we still don't moderate our strength. Nail said to himself as he watched his new green friend fighting near him. Boom. A few meters away, a few seconds ago. No. This can't be happening. I was supposed to be the second strongest in the universe, for some reason he forgets about King Cold, seriously. Toriyama invented that character ladder without any logic. Not only today has the Super Saiyan appeared before me, the only existence Lord Frisia fears, seriously, Frisia is supposed to know about Beerus. King Cold 2.0. There are also two Namkians stronger than me. This is impossible. Jinyu shouted while having an absurd and exaggerated existential trauma upon realizing that Piccolo was much stronger than him. And therefore he kicked himself out of the top 3 most powerful characters in the universe, top that only existed in his mind. This guy has more than one problem on his head, Piccolo thought as he observed how incredibly stupid Jinyu was, either because of his postures, exaggeration or envy problems. But suddenly Jinyu started laughing, ha 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 ha. I reaffirm everything, he has a big mental problem, Piccolo thought with less doubts than before. I can't help but laugh when I think about how there's someone as strong as you. The mere fact that I, the great Jinyu, have come across someone far stronger, simply brings me joy, said Jinyu once again as if he were completely crazy. Undoubtedly, he's out of his mind, thought Piccolo once again. However, what he saw next upset him even more. Slash. Plash. Since Jinyu seriously injured himself, opening a hole near his heart. And before Jinyu could do or say anything else. Plash. Piccolo at great speed got behind him and with his whip arm cut off his head. Slash. 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 And then he tore the whole body into small pieces. I don't know what he intended to do, but it sure wasn't a good thing, Piccolo said as he wiped Jinyu's purple blood from his arm. Piccolo, despite believing and confirming that Jinyu was a guy with serious mental problems, didn't completely underestimate him. It was obvious that he was trying to do something dangerous and strange. Something he seemed very confident about. Something that could possibly be a problem for him despite the difference in power. So instead of waiting like a stupid moron to see what stratagem he could use against him and possibly be harmed by it, he mortally attacked him as quickly as he could, even though that would prevent viewers from seeing what Jinyu was capable of doing. Well, we have already eliminated this scum. Now it's time to go where Goku is and see as if he is still a rival to me, Piccolo said as he flew towards where Goku was still fighting. So also Nail, who had just killed Berta, went after him at a similar speed, towards the last enemy. And below them, there were several people who admired them with their mouths wide open, self-conscious and without moving an inch. Well, in the end our training has been useless, said Krillin, amazed by the comparative grievance between them and the aliens. At least Ten Shinhan has managed to kill one, said Chaos, who was still open-mouthed after seeing how easily they had killed those 4 monsters. I feel that beating this guy has no special merit, Ten Shinhan said being humble. He couldn't claim that merit after being left on the bench the entire game as if he were an inept substitute who only hindered the Tem. Hundreds of years training and I haven't had a second of notoriety. It's very frustrating. Mutant Rashi said, who felt as useless as the others despite the fact that Broly had originally listed him in the group of those who could perhaps do something in this planet with Piccolo. However, that depression momentarily dissipated when they realized that someone was approaching them at high speed. Someone with incredible battle power. Someone who certainly they wouldn't be able to overcome. Wait, this key. Strangely that was a key that they had already felt before. Ginger. Everyone shouted with some concern when they saw Ginger appear beg. And it was normal for them to feel uneasy being near her. Despite the fact that this energetic, tsundere, crazy and even funny girl was an ally right now due to very special circumstances, Broly, none of them forgot that a few weeks ago she was the enemy. An enemy that back then they were able to defeat without too much difficulty but that now thanks to the convenient Scion genetics had become monstrously strong for them. Damn it. We have trained in that hell for years and we have hardly improved. However, she and Piccolo in the same time frame have become thousands of times stronger than us. They thought as they cursed their earthling genes. She was a temporary ally who would one day possibly cease to be an ally. Oh my, you were able to beat the Jinyu force. That means you were also trained to death by the three-eyed monster and his minions. You have become monstrously strong, right? Ginger said as he landed in front of the group composed by bald, almost bald, bald by choice and ex-bald human. Obviously upon hearing what the Scion said, the Shinning heads couldn't help but think. What? We have defeated who? We are monstrous what? We have only looked. The Namekians had done all the work, Goldo doesn't count. Obviously this was a misunderstanding, so Krillin tried to clarify it, this. Actually. Yes, they weren't easy enemies. But, after a year of hellish training, these 5 villains have been no match for the incredible powers of the legendary Kame Sennin, and his students. Baby. Mutant Rashi said, lying in a shameless way to pretend to be cool in front of one of the few beautiful and single women with whom he had had contact in recent months. Hi. The Z warriors shouted in amazement and even disgust upon hearing the aberrant lies of Mutant Rashi, who was capable of anything for touching a tit. Really? Ginger asked inquisitively as she approached him, blatantly violating the minimum distance laws that in many pandemics it is advisable to have. Yup. I had to complain. Of course. Rashi replied, who reconsidered if he had exaggerated much with his lies. Lies that were extremely easy to refute. Oh. I see. I'm glad to hear that, Ginger said as her eyes darkened and she put on a rather hostile smile that was quite out of place with the words and cheerful tone she was using. Clash. Pam. Ah. And at lightning speed and without anyone there being able to notice. Ginger made a judo ki for Mutant Rashi, immobilizing him on the ground without being able to escape. Which obviously put his teammates on guard. What do you intend to do to him? The Z warriors screamed upon see that their lying friend had been instantly affected by his own bad karma. However, they couldn't be blinded by rancor and disappointment. He was their friend and teacher and was being attacked by someone he couldn't defend against. He was in great danger. Me? I just want to pay him in the same currency. Pay him for the things he did to me on Earth. Ginger said as she continued to grip Mutant Rashi very effectively with her legs. And released one of her arms. Arm with which seemed to want to attack him. Oh no. Mutant Rashi-sama, the Z warriors screamed in fear. Ginger right now had terrifying power. Any of her attacks had the potential to kill all four of them at the same time. In addition, if Broly was telling the truth they would no longer be resurrected by him. And they couldn't use the Dragon Balls to bring him back, as Rashi was previously resurrected when evil Piccolo Sr. killed him alongside Krillin. No. Krillin shouted upon see that Ginger's hand descend in slow motion but at high speed, with evident intentions to harm her victim at a vital point. Plash. Ah. And that vital point was his ass. This is for having touched my ass without my permission. Ginger screamed as she applied on Mutant Rashi the same type of corporal punishment her sister used on her. Although this time she believed that she was doing some kind of poetic justice with Mutant Rashi, since she was precisely with his ass the part with which he molested. Finally that perverted would pay for the sexual harassment to which he submitted her in her previous fight. For that reason, each vengeful swat felt incredibly satisfying to her. This is for touching my breasts. Splash. Ahagak. This is for touching my ass. Splash. Ugh. This is for scene where no one should have seen me. Splash. Splash. Ahagak. Yes. Yes. Ugh. Kaya. You are a disgusting pervert. Splash. 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 Ahagak. Ahagak. Ugh. Yees. Kaya. Disgusting. Disgusting. Stop enjoying it. Otherwise this is no longer funny. Splash. Ugh. I told you to stop. You are embarrassing me. Baka. Splash. Ugh. Yees. And seeing this show more embarrassing than comical. This, boys. How about we go with Piccolo and Nail? Krillin proposed, who wanted to get out of there as soon as possible for obvious reasons. Yes. I think it will be the best. I suppose when they get tired they will stop. Said Ten Shinhan, who was starting to suffer from a migraine due to that unfortunate audiovisual show. Yes, please, let's get out of here. Said Chaos, who didn't want to be related to those two, despite the fact that the planet was uninhabited. Planet Namek several kilometers from there. In the middle of a deserted esplanade. Two people fought with the same repetitive cliché pattern consisting of making thousands of blows at an absurd speed that no one was able to follow with their eyes. Exactly the same pattern despite increasing power scale. Bomb. Plas. Zaspa. Crash. And as always used to happen in these situations. Suddenly everyone was able to watch one of them win in slow motion, throwing the loser onto the ground. Bomb. And in this case the loser. Kaioken X20. Ka, mi, ha, boom. Was Frisia. However, he wasn't the one who was losing. Damn it to hell. How can it be? That didn't have much effect on him at all. He wasn't bluffing this time either. He really hasn't been using any more than half of his power, Goku said, very tired and injured after having been fighting intensely against Frisia for a few minutes. And morally wounded by having used his most powerful attack on him. An attack that only managed to injure him but not seriously. I am impressed that a lower life form Scion has such awesome power. This is the first anyone has done this much harm to my body. But the game is over. Damn Scion. Frieza yelled with great fury as he progressively increased his power with the intention of reaching 100% of his abilities. The game was over. The game was over. Frieza had an absurd problem to control all his energy and power. Energy and power that if not properly controlled would grow exponentially until exceed the limits of his body and explode. Theoretically. This was the reason why he had multiple involutions to naturally limit his power. Also, that was the reason why he wasn't using all his power against Goku from the beginning, even in his final form. Frieza, after recovering his true form, progressively increased his power, something that benefited Goku during the fight, which with the Kaioshin X20 and with no energy to absorb with the Genki Dama could only reach half the power of the mortal enemy of his race. However, as always used to happen, Goku didn't take advantage of the moment when Frieza was more vulnerable to finish him off. And obviously, that wasn't a very good idea, since by giving Frieza time, he was able to naturally increase his power to a level that Goku couldn't match. Fucking monkey. I'll make you pay 10 times over, no, 100 times over. Frieza yelled as he hit Goku over and over while grabbing his neck with the tail. Pam. Palm. Kaya. Chaffed. Block. Crash. Cuffed. It was as if Goku had become a living punching bag. What happened to all that energy you had a moment ago? Have you finally used up the last of your power? Indeed, the Saiyans are a lower life form, whose only talent is in fighting. Every loss one of you are fools. Killing you off was the right decision. Ho ho ho. Frieza said as he continued to hold Goku's neck with his tail, looking at him with contempt, disgust and condescension. As if Goku were a limbless cockroach that was about to be stepped on. Goku was barely out of energy, he had used all his resources, was seriously injured, at the mercy of his enemy, and his morale was at a loss. However, someone near that place felt even worse than him. Vegeta. Yam sighed upon seeing Vegeta's bitter expression. She had been observing this torture for a few minutes and was unable to help Gohan's curse that forced her to help people in danger, due to Broly's interference. Kakarot. You, even though I hated to recognize it, you have become strong, tens of times stronger than I am. And still. Can't you beat that bastard? And despite that, despite how strong you have become. You. Don't tell me this is the best our race is capable of. No, it can't be like that. It shouldn't be like that, Vegeta said, who began to ramble with great suffering, anger, pain and resentment. The rage he felt was so deep that his mouth and hands were even bleeding from the force with which he squeezed them. He didn't know how to calm this agonizing pain in his pride. To the pride of the Saiyan race, condemned to serve and perish at Frieza's hands, without being able to rebel and emerge victorious against him, Vegeta at this point no longer considered Broly as someone of his race. Pain and suffering that didn't go unnoticed by another person. Ayo Vegeta. I didn't know you could become empathetic and worry about someone other than yourself. Precisely of Goku, the one who beat you in such a humiliating way and let you live, which is even more humiliating. The low-class warrior who beat you up and who in all probability would give you another beating more easily than before. Damn Vegeta, I'm very touched. I thought you were a fucking scum. A grumpy dwarf with recessive hair with a lousy sense of humor. A heartless wretch who doesn't deserve even the air he breathes. A humanoid epidemic that everyone would want to get rid of. A fucking second fiddle, a sidekick destined to be humiliated forever by others to magnify them. But in the end it turns out that you're not such a bad guy, you're still scum in my eyes, but a little less. But don't worry, you still have room for improvement, Broly said, pretending to wipe non-existent tears from his 3 eyes while praising Vegeta in the most disrespectful way he could do. More than a compliment, it was an extensive list of insults. Appreciation that pissed Vegeta off even more than before. Shut up. Not even in dreams would I care about the life of that clown. Didn't you hear him? This is the guy who destroyed our home planet when we Saiyan served as his hands and feet, working exactly as he ordered. He killed all of us except us. Vegeta also killed quite a few, but we'll skip that part. Your father, my father, his father. He feared that a Super Saiyan would be born among us. And even so. Although you are sure that unstoppable monster of the legend that he fears. You have done nothing. Did you know everything for years despite being so powerful and just stared? You just stared even now without even blinking after all he has just saw yet. Is there not even a drop of Saiyan pride in your veins? Vegeta shouted, who felt completely desolate and desperate, and above all insulted by Broly's attitude in this situation. So much so that he was even starting to cry due to the great helplessness he felt in this situation. But especially for dealing with Broly and his annoying personality. You don't have to be such a tsundere a crying Vegeta, I know that deep down you love him. But no. I don't give a shit about that shit. My mind is too evolved to care about stupid tribalisms. If there is someone who is so stupid and racist, it is best to ignore him, especially the stupid frost demons, the scum of the galaxy. As for the dead Scions, I don't care too much, they had killed so many civilizations that the fact that theirs disappeared was even justified. Also, due to my mutations, no Scion considers me a Scion, even you don't either, Broly said, showing complete disregard for the emotional reasons Vegeta had exposed. Is this guy Gohan's teacher? The Repapi boy of high moral stature who had put this curse on her? How could the contrast be so big? How was it possible that such a moralistic child have emerged from the training of someone so grey? However, unexpectedly Broly blushed a little, and trying to pretend he didn't mean to help from the beginning he said, although there were some good ones, like Goku's mother, and maybe his father too. Well, I guess I can't just sit around doing nothing. And it's a bummer, just now that I had managed to sit in a perfect position. Finally, good news. Finally, Broly would do something other than physically, mentally, and verbally abuse them. This was something that both Yam, Vegeta, and even Piccolo, who had just arrived a few seconds ago, celebrated with passion. Broly would finally get his hands dirty to help them. Or so they believed. Zie Warudo. Limited version. Because at the precise moment that Broly got up from his chair, time stopped. He stopped the fucking time. But for some reason they were able to see, hear and think, but not move. So they had no choice but to look like mannequins how Broly slowly advanced towards Frieza. What the hell is this? Why can't I move? Why can't I kill this pathetic monkey? Frieza thought as he continued to hold Goku, and watched as Broly approached them as if he were a retiree who was walking through the park watching the flowers grow. Something that terrified him. He in some way had left him completely unprotected, and despite being aware of the situation he couldn't even move an inch of energy in his body. Impossible. This guy, what does he intend to do? Frieza thought as he reconsidered once again how dangerous Broly is. But this time he didn't try to sweep in his favor by believing that Broly was just a sneaky wizard with a strange technique to momentarily increase his power. He is monstrously strong. Maybe more than him. Maybe Broly really wasn't lying when he said that the Emperor of the Universe was nothing before his 3 eyes. And unceremoniously, Broly pulled Goku off from Frieza's tail and grabbed him in the same way with his sand tail, but from the waist. Broly didn't want to strangle him, and put him at his height so they could speak face to face. Goku, it seems that you have received another brutal beating. Okay. I have become a specialist in this in recent years. Hee hee. Goku responded by masking his pain with some humor by remembering the beatings Broly and Frost had given him in a consecutive year almost uninterruptedly. Quite well-fitting funny commentary, unlike Marvel's, which are usually out of place, so Broly couldn't help but giggle as he remembered the huge Prozenkai beatings Goku had received until now, hahaha. I'm glad to see you still have the energy to joke, that means that maybe you could continue fighting. But as the referee and doctor of this match I must make sure that you can continue. So, look me in the eyes. And by saying that, not only Goku. Everyone in the vicinity looked into Broly's eyes. Not because Broly had hypnotized them to obey his orders, but because it was impossible not to look at them. It was impossible to look away of those eyes. Because it was impossible to understand what was happening. Since Broly's eyes began to mutate in a very shocking and mysterious way. This was definitely not something normal. Not even for Broly, or so they believed. In his eyes, ripple pattern that spreads over the eyeball began to form, his iris turned a light blue color, with what looked like a floral pattern that overlapped with the ripple pattern. But most fascinating of all were the 9 red tomos that continuously circulated between the ripples of his eyes, as if they were a propeller. This was the Rinne Tessie Sharingan. The perfect fusion between Rinnegan, the Tessigan and Sharingan, thus creating the most powerful dojutsu in the world of Naruto. A dojutsu that when being contemplated, whether that person from the world of Naruto or not, it was impossible to avoid being impressed and feeling fear. This guy really is a Scion. What the hell are those eyes? All present thought when they saw those eyes, which instinctively inspired fear in their hearts. However, their sight didn't linger for long in Broly's sinister eyes. Since something equally shocking seemed to be happening with Goku. Ahai Kai. Goku suddenly screamed with anger and hatred and his eyes went blank. His energy and power were increasing in an excessive way and his muscles also tensed, becoming more rocky and bulky. However, what stood out the most was his hair. His characteristic black hair, impossible to comb, between flashes was turning blonde and pointy. And his aura also changed to that same color and shape. Ahai Kai. And with that change of look and power, the time went by again in the normal way. What the hell did just happen? What has Broly done to Goku? Shouted Ginger and the Earthlings who arrived very recently after time resumed its course. This power. Damn Goku, you've outdone me again, said Piccolo, who was somewhat furious to see that Goku had won him again with an unexpected power-up. I will have to increase my production of mini Piccolos and train them hard if I want to overcome him in a few years. Appearance change that filled Yam with anticipation, which tried to contrast with Vegeta. If what was happening is what was really happening, Vegeta, that's. Yes, there is no doubt. It is the same as in the legend. Goku is the legendary Super Saiyan, Vegeta said, who was in parts pleased to see that the legend was real, and extremely furious and envious because he wasn't the Super Saiyan. What? The Super Saiyan, did you say? Impossible. Besides, wasn't that other monkey supposed to be that supposed Super Saiyan? What is this joke? Frieza said with great frustration and headache as he saw the Saiyans around him becoming rarer, unpredictable, irritating and possibly more powerful than him. How do you feel? Better than a few seconds ago. Broly said as he dropped the Super Saiyan Goku on the ground after having succeeded with his plan. But nobody expected what was going to happen next. Since Goku, instead of facing Frieza after a few not too important and somewhat obvious questions, hugged Broly with great joy and sadness. He was so emotionally affected that he couldn't even help crying a little. Broly. This is a dream. I can't believe you're alive. Egg? WTF. Everyone exclaimed, including Frieza, upon hearing this unexpected nonsense. Becoming a Super Saiyan makes you more stupid? That wasn't explained in the legend, Vegeta and Yam thought, in addition to the general surprise that everyone shared. Broly, what happened? I'm in, this is Namek. I cannot believe it. Krillin, Rashi, Piccolo. Frieza. You are all alive. I don't get it. What happened to Rotobask, the annihilator of universes? I was fighting that bastard. That bastard who killed everyone. And without you there and without the Dragon Balls, it was impossible to resurrect them. What is happening? This is a dream or an illusion? Goku said, very upset and anxious, as if he had thousands of things to say and millions of doubts to answer and very little time for it. Goku, all of that was an illusion. We are at the moment when you were fighting Frieza on the planet Namek, Broly said as he tried to calm Goku. What the hell is going on? Everyone else asked, they weren't understanding anything at all. What? Goku shouted for more than obvious reasons. We are on December 24th, 762, in your battle against Frieza, at the moment when I stopped time, held you with my tail and you looked into my eyes. At that time I made you have a pretty long illusion in the span of a second. Yes, I know, I am incredible, so you would be very angry about the loss of your loved ones and thereby become a Super Saiyan due to that rage, Broly said, explaining the use he had given to one of the most powerful Dojutsu. The most powerful, cruel and horrible technique that has ever existed in the world of Naruto. The Infinite Tsukiyomi. A terrifying ability that created infinite filler chapters for minor characters that ceased to be relevant before Shippuden. What? 762. Wait, now I remember this. This means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Have it been 10 years? I have been 10 years in an illusion, Goku shouted while counting with his fingers the years that had passed after Frieza's defeat. Yes, 10 years and 1 day. Merry Christmas, Broly answered atypically, as if it wasn't important. Are you crazy? Why have you put me in an illusion for 10 years only for me to become Super Saiyan? It's totally unnecessary. Goku questioned it out loud for completely understandable and obvious reasons. Well, I needed to create a good context in which I died in a credible way despite being totally immortal, with a good character development to make my death memorable and heroic. Saving the multiverse, for example, and not in any way, it must be a death that made you cry. I needed to die so that you would stop depending on my resurrections and my ability to solve everything. In the same way, I also needed wait some years after my death until a new threat to your lives appeared, otherwise it would have seemed very suspicious or forced, so I had to leave a few years of margin between conflict and conflict. Years in which I tried to hone my film director skills that I will need in the distant future, creating different types of family situations, ones in which you try to be a better father and husband and of course learning to work. You will thank me. Until the final villain appeared, who would kill everyone but you, thus destroying the Dragon Balls, leaving zero possibilities of resurrection, thus awakening the Super Saiyan. What will you use to beat Frieza right now? Broly said to justify his overly long genjutsu. And as expected, Goku, who had lived 10 years in a lie, tried to make sure and believe that something he lived was real. Then, wait. The anti-spiral being that merged with the universes and tried to destroy them to end everything, the one you merged with, dying in the process to counter his ego and prevent the destruction of everything. Was. Yes, was a genjutsu, Broly replied almost automatically. And incredulously, not losing hope. And Rotobask the Annihilator of. And without being able to finish, Broly replied automatically, he was also a genjutsu. But Goku didn't lose hope that something was real, and my award for best father in the world in 768? A genjutsu too, of course. I made up that contest with a cash prize so that Chi-Chi could force you to participate. I even rigged it to give you an advantage. It was all an illusion. Broly answered bluntly so that Goku wouldn't ask any more repetitive questions. This cannot be real. Everything has been an illusion. But it was so real. Wait, am I still in an illusion? Is it possible, that our life is nothing more than an illusion? Goku thought aloud, making visible the great existential crisis he was having right now, so much that he even began to philosophize just like a marijuana addict in a slump. And as his permanent and temporary allies listened to his conversation, understood its content, and began to fear once again the power, lack of common sense, exaggeration, madness, and stupidity of his mysterious, super powerful, and unpredictable guardian. FIU. FIU. 2 laser beams flew in the direction of Broly and Goku's head. Kia. One of them was rejected by Goku with a slight movement of his fist. Chaff. And the other was devoured by Broly, as if it had been a fried potato thrown into the air. The attacks were avoided. Something that frustrated Frieza a lot, but at least that was better than the indifference. How long did you plan to ignore me, you bastards? Frieza said while attacking with ki attacks to demand attention like a little kid. Well, Goku. What do you think if you take care of that inept first and then I answer to you and the others? By the idiot face he's making, I bet he wants to know more about the Super Saiyan, Broly suggested while pointing to Frieza with his thumb and Vegeta with his tail. Yes. I think a good fight that I didn't finish in my illusory life may help me clear my mind, Goku said coldly and violently as he looked at Frieza. The fight continues. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.